He thought his old friend had built a successful career, until he found him fixing pipes in a rundown apartment. What he did next changed everything. The city streets bustled as Ethan Cole, billionaire CEO of Cole Enterprises, stepped out of his luxury car. He had come to oversee a new property development his company had just acquired. It was a high-end renovation project meant to turn old apartments into luxury condos. But as he walked toward the entrance, a familiar voice caught his attention. "Pass me the wrench, will you?" Ethan froze. He turned toward the sound and saw a man in a work uniform crouched under a sink, fixing a leaking pipe. His eyes narrowed, his brain catching up to what he was seeing. Number it couldn't be. The man wiped sweat from his forehead, grumbling as he tightened a bolt. Ethan took a step closer, and his heart nearly stopped. It was Jake Lawson, his best friend from college, the same guy who once dreamed of becoming an engineer, the one who had big plans to change the world. And now, he was here, working as a plumber. Ethan's chest tightened. How did this happen? Jake finally looked up, and his face went pale. "Ethan," he said, eyes wide in shock. Ethan smirked, masking the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "Well, I'll be damned. Jake Lawson. Long time no see." Jake let out a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, it's been a while." Ethan folded his arms. "Didn't expect to find you here, man." Jake shrugged, trying to play it off. "Yeah, well, life doesn't always go as planned." Ethan didn't respond right away, because in that moment, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let his old friend stay here, not when he had the power to change everything. The next day, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Jake. The guy who once dreamed of designing skyscrapers was now fixing leaky pipes in old buildings. And that didn't sit right with him. So he made a call. "Get me everything on Jake Lawson. His work history, education, what happened after college. I want all of it." Within hours, his assistant sent over a full report. Ethan skimmed through it, his jaw tightening with every line. Jake had been on track to become a top engineer, but after his father got sick, he dropped out of his master's program to take care of him. Bills piled up. He took whatever work he could find, and somehow 1 year turned into 5. Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't just bad luck. Life had completely derailed Jake's future, but that was about to change. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Set up a meeting with Jake Lawson. Offer him a job. Not just any job. I want him leading our next big project." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, he doesn't have recent experience in engineering. Are you sure?" Ethan's voice was firm. "I don't care. He has the talent. He just never got the chance to prove it, and I'm about to give him that chance." A few hours later, Jake walked into Cole Enterprises' massive headquarters, looking completely out of place. The same guy who had spent years covered in grease and sweat was now standing in a high-end corporate office. He spotted Ethan waiting for him in a sleek boardroom. "All right, man," Jake said, folding his arms. "What's this really about?" Ethan smirked. "It's about fixing something that should have never been broken." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Ethan slid a contract across the table. "You're the new lead project engineer for our next skyscraper build." Jake blinked, then laughed. "Very funny, man." Ethan leaned forward, his smirk fading. "I'm dead serious." Jake's smile disappeared. "Ethan, I haven't done engineering in years." Ethan nodded. "And whose fault is that? Life knocked you down, but it didn't take away your talent. You just need a way back in." Jake hesitated, staring at the contract. A 6-figure salary, full benefits, a team of engineers waiting for his leadership. His hands shook slightly. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan's voice softened. "Because someone should have done it sooner." Silence filled the room. Then, after a long pause, Jake picked up the pen. And as he signed his name, one thing was clear. His life was about to change forever. 6 months later, The sun gleamed off the towering steel structure as Jake stood on the 50th floor of Cole Enterprises' newest skyscraper. His skyscraper. He adjusted his hard hat, scanning the blueprints in his hands. The crew looked to him for direction now, because he wasn't just another worker anymore. He was the lead engineer. He still couldn't believe it. 6 months ago, he was fixing leaking pipes. Now he was overseeing one of the most ambitious construction projects in the city. And it was all because Ethan had believed in him when no one else did. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. Ethan stood there, arms crossed, smirking. "Not bad, Lawson. Not bad at all." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Still feels surreal." Ethan stepped forward, looking out over the city. "I didn't give you this job, Jake. You earned it. I just gave you back the chance life stole from you." Jake exhaled, glancing down at the blueprints. "You didn't have to do it, though. You could have walked away." Ethan's smirk softened. "And let the best engineer I've ever known waste his talent. Not a chance." Jake grinned, shaking his head. "You're a stubborn bastard, you know that?" Ethan chuckled. "That's why I'm successful." Jake looked around, at the towering structure, the crew that now worked under him, the future that finally felt like his again. He turned back to Ethan, his voice filled with gratitude. "You changed my life, man." Ethan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Then promise me one thing." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What?" Ethan smirked. "The next time you see someone struggling, someone who just needs one chance, you be the guy who steps up." Jake's throat tightened, because he knew exactly what Ethan meant. He nodded, gripping Ethan's hand firmly. "I will." And as they stood there, looking out over the city, one thing was clear. Jake Lawson wasn't just back. He was building something great, and this time, nothing would stop him. 5 years later. The grand opening of Lawson Towers was a spectacle, a stunning, state-of-the-art skyscraper standing tall in the heart of the city. The building wasn't just an architectural achievement, it was a symbol of second chances, resilience, and the power of believing in the right people. And at the center of it all, Jake Lawson. He stood on the stage, adjusting his tie, staring at the massive crowd that had gathered. Executives, engineers, and media outlets were all here to see the man who had gone from plumber to one of the most respected names in the industry. Ethan stood in the front row, arms crossed, his smirk never fading. Jake took a deep breath before stepping up to the microphone. 5 years ago, I was fixing pipes in an old apartment complex." The crowd chuckled, but Jake's voice remained serious. "I thought my dream was gone. I thought the world had moved on without me. But someone saw me when no one else did. Someone reminded me that talent doesn't disappear. It just needs a second chance." He turned toward Ethan, their eyes locking for a brief moment. "Ethan Cole didn't just give me a job. He gave me my future back." The audience erupted into applause. Jake exhaled, looking up at the towering structure behind him. "And now I want to do the same for others. This building isn't just mine. It's for every hard-working person who just needs an opportunity to prove themselves." He gestured toward a new initiative logo on the screen behind him. The Lawson Foundation, creating second chances in engineering and skilled trades. Ethan's smirk widened as he nodded in approval. Because this was exactly what he had hoped for. Jake had come full circle. He wasn't just successful, he was paying it forward. And as the ribbon was cut and the celebrations began, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a comeback story. It was the beginning of a legacy. 10 years later, Jake Lawson stood at the top floor of Lawson Enterprises headquarters, staring out at the sprawling city skyline. So much had changed in a decade. He wasn't just a lead engineer anymore. He was the CEO of one of the most successful construction and engineering firms in the country. His skyscrapers stood tall across multiple cities. His foundation had helped thousands of young people enter the engineering and skilled trades industry, and none of it would have happened if one man hadn't given him a second chance. The familiar sound of footsteps made him turn. Ethan Cole stepped into the office, looking around with an approving nod. "Damn, Lawson," Ethan said with a smirk. "I knew you'd make it big, but this?" Jake chuckled, gesturing toward the massive office. "Not bad for a guy who used to fix leaky pipes, huh?" Ethan shook his head, laughing. "Not bad at all." They stood in silence for a moment, taking it all in. Then Ethan asked, "So, what's next?" Jake smiled, the weight of his journey settling in. "Now? I build something even bigger." He reached into his desk and pulled out a familiar black business card, the same kind Ethan had once given him. Only this time, it had Jake's name on it. "And when I do, I'll be the one giving second chances." Ethan smirked. "That's what I like to hear." As they clinked their glasses in celebration, one thing was certain. Jake Lawson wasn't just back. He was unstoppable. And now, it was his turn to change lives.